Zettel für die lange Weg. 2 Flaschen Whisky für die Zeit. Und ich date gern habe, du bist dabei. Maria geht, fahrt mal weg, ist weit. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Hab kriegt mein Zettel für den langen Weg. Du scheinst da, als mir finden kann. Es hat Maria und Dale ganz wunderbar. Hass ich dir den weißen Dank. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watch sehen. Well, good Ovid, leave a line. Good evening, dear people. We are back at you with another episode of PA Dutch Live. We are now almost, more than halfway through the month of April. My goodness, where is this year going? I am so glad that you are joining us tonight. If this is your first time joining us on the show, welcome. If this is your 45th time, I don't think we've done that many episodes, but if it's your 45th time joining us, welcome as well. For those of you that are regulars here on the channel, you know what to do right off the bat. I love to give shout outs to people from wherever they're joining us. So whether you're watching on Facebook or whether you're watching on the YouTube channel, let me know in the comment section where you are joining us from so we can give you a personal shout out. There were people already throwing things in the comment section even before I went live. I don't know how they were able to do that, but that's great. So let me give some shout outs here real quick. We got Burkhard, who is joining us. Guda Numi Dog from Alabama. We got the Deep South already represented. Good friend of mine, Erin Eldridge, she says, hello, Herman. Oh my God. Hey, it's good to see you here virtually. Our dear friend Carol, she is joining us from beautiful downtown Burnville, as she does every month. Carol, I guess are your tulips open, Carol? Are your lilacs open? Those are the questions. Mine are a little slow in coming, but they're on their way. They are on their way. Our good friend Norman Jung staying up real late past his bedtime over there in Germany, saying, Gute Maria, Aliepa. Yeah, it is good morning for him. Not quite for us just yet. Norman, good to have you with us again. Our good friend Seth Moak is joining us. Gute Nomidog from San Diego. Aliepa, we got the West Coast represented. Hi. Stefan is joining us. Gott ist da lieber Nora Springs, Iowa, the Midwest. We got, holy cow, we got people jumping in from all over the place. David joins us this week again this month from Boyertown, waving his hand wave back to Boyertown. Dr. All, guten Tag oder guten Morgen. I don't know what it's like wherever you are, Dr. All. It's evening here in Pennsylvania. Jeremy Reese, I know that guy. He's gluten tag. No, I think that's something different. That should be guten Tag. Jeremy, good joining. Thank you for joining the live stream there. I'll talk to you in class tomorrow about how to say that properly. Draven is also joining us. That's a student of mine as well. I got a bunch of students joining the live stream tonight. Draven, thanks for joining us. Eric is joining us from Holland. Oh my gosh, now we got the Netherlands represented. We are all over the place tonight. Our good friend Rachel, she joins us every month with her wonderful son there in Fleetwood. Berks County represented well tonight. Brigitte, our good friend, joining us from Philadelphia, as we say in Pennsylvania, Dutch Philadelphia. So glad to have you. I hope the whole family's watching too. Our good friend Dolly Moyer, she joins us every month as well from beautiful Fleetwood. Boy, Berks County, how about that? As a Berks County boy, I'm feeling pretty good tonight. Our good friend Mo is joining us from Midlothian, Virginia. You'll see his picture later on in the show. He's modeling. He has become a clothes model for us. Scott is joining us from West Virginia. Thanks for joining, Scott. There's tons of people here tonight. This is wonderful. Todd is joining us from Lee Heighton. Now we got the other part of Pennsylvania represented. Who else we got here? That guy 2105 Northern Michigan. My goodness, are you on the UP? Are you a Uper? That guy 2150. I learned about those people when I was in Michigan. Glenn, another student of mine. Boy, we got people joining us all the time. Guten Tag, Herr Mainford. Glenn's joining us from beautiful Sugar Valley, Pennsylvania. If you know where that is, I'll give you $1. Marjorie is joining us from Plainfield Township, up near the Poconos, there in vacation country in Pennsylvania. Ava is also one of my students joining us. Hello, Handmade for boy. All you guys get extra credit points in the grade book starting tomorrow. This is wonderful. Scott, our good friend Scott, is joining us from Penn Argyle on the Blowbach there on the Blue Mountains. My good friend Monchi, boy, we got it all over the place. Monchi Kuda Ovid, ich gehe gleich schlafen. I'm going to sleep soon. Has to work tomorrow morning. He's joining us from Germany as well. Hey, sweet dreams, Monchi, Sisa drama, as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch. But thanks for checking in. Really appreciate it. Pete Z is joining us from Emmaus, or as some people say, Emos. No, we know it's Emmaus. Who else we got here? Carl Heinz. Gute Morgen from, oh my gosh, now we got Asia represented from the Philippines. Thank you for joining us. Holy cow. And I think we got right now, Stefan is also joining us from Iowa Valley, Loganton. Maybe they meant Sugar Valley. Loganton, Pennsylvania. That's in Clinton County, Pennsylvania. My goodness, we are all over the globe tonight. We got many countries represented. We got people from all over Pennsylvania here in the United States. I am so glad that you are all with me tonight, and you are in for a great show this evening. We have a wonderful guest that we'll be bringing on here in a couple minutes, Candace Perry, but I'll let the excitement grow a little bit until you bring her on. But as is the case every month, I like to go through a little bit of news, what's going on in the greater Pennsylvania Dutch region, and just to get everybody up to date. They can mark their calendars with some things, and then we'll get into our interview. But tonight we will be talking all things Schwenkfelders, and if you have no idea what that's about, you're going to find out tonight. Hey, a couple things for your calendars. Mark your calendars, please. If you would like to attend a Pennsylvania Dutch language church service and you're in the greater Lebanon area, please check out Zor Lutheran Church. That is in Lebanon, Mount Zion area, on Sunday, April 23rd at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And the sermon in Pennsylvania Dutch will be given by Ethan Levengood. He's a good speaker. He speaks nice. You should check that out if that's something you are interested in. Another thing for your calendar, dear friends, if you have children or grandchildren, or you have friends who have children or grandchildren in the greater Berks County area, and they're looking for something different to do this summer, might I recommend you check out the Berks History Center's Junior Historian Camp. We know summer camps are all over the place. You can do tons of things. But I think this one's pretty unique because, as you can see, the kids are going to learn about history, and there will be some emphasis on Pennsylvania Dutch. So please check out, if you are interested, or if you know someone that has kids that would be interested, Berks History Center. You can find all their information at their website, berkshistory.org, and the education coordinator is Vicky Hefner. Good Pennsylvania Dutch name there, and I'm sure she will get you all the information you need to know about that camp. One last thing for your calendars, dear friends. It's coming, and it's coming soon. I don't know what number it is this year. I think we're into the 80s now, or upper 70s. The Kutztown Folk Festival will be taking place from July 1st through the 9th in beautiful Kutztown, Pennsylvania, there at the fairgrounds. Please mark your calendars. Come on out. We'll have much more information about what you can expect in this year's Folk Festival coming up on a later show, or a future show, I should say. The month of June, we'll be highlighting Heather Zimmerman, the director there. She'll be coming on the show to tell us about what we can expect for this year's Folk Festival. I'm involved in the planning of that, and it's going to be a doozy. Last year's was great. This year's is going to be even better. So mark your calendars, July 1st through the 9th. The last couple of months, we've been lucky that we've had a friend of ours in Germany who is a professional cartoonist who's been doing some of his cartoons that he normally does in Pfälzisch dialect, the language that our forefathers, the area where a lot of our forefathers and foremothers came from. But he's been doing some in Pennsylvania Dutch for me and sending them along. Here's one. For those of you who can't read or speak Pennsylvania Dutch, I'll translate for you. But you can see we got two ladies there in the kitchen, or it looks like at the dining table. And from the back room, we hear somebody saying, Los Molsena, let me see. Nix nuts. Ach du Verdolda. Ishkapippel. So Nixnuts, we know, is a Pennsylvania Dutch word for like a kid that it doesn't behave themselves. And then he says, "Oh, du Verdolda," kind of like, "Oh my gosh, ah." And then Ishkapippel, which is another funny word in Pennsylvania Dutch for somebody that's kind of like a character. And then the next cell it goes, "Wieshkal." Oh, what a son of a gun. Belsnigel, comma, do ... So here comes the joke. The one lady says to the other one, "Gep nix drum, die Pep is jusch am Google for a neue password for sei Waterfresser." Translation: don't worry about it. Your dad's just trying to figure out a new password for his computer. Using all these Pennsylvania Dutch words, and it mustn't be letting him use it. I thought that was funny. Maybe you found it funny. If not, that's all right. Thanks, Herr Boysel, our good friend Stefan in Germany, for sending that to us. Every month for the last couple of months, we've been giving a good old hee-haw style salute to some community in Pennsylvania Dutch country. And this month, our salute goes to, drum roll, the town of Skippack in Montgomery County. Tiny little town there in Montgomery County, founded in 1702. Current population, as far as I can find online, is 3,758 people there in beautiful Skippack. So a shout out to Montgomery County and the town of Skippack. Salute. Well, that's all I have for news and things like that for this month. So without further ado, let me bring on our guest for the evening, Candace Perry from the Schwenkfelders. We'll find out what that's all about here in a second. Candace, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug, and hello to everyone out in Dougland.
Dougland, I love that. I think we need to get like license plates or something.
Yes.
Well, Candace, I always like to start each interview kind of the same way. Give the people a little bit of background about yourself. Do you have any Pennsylvania Dutch background in your family tree, or what role does Pennsylvania Dutch play in your life?
Well, I do indeed. My father was 100% Pennsylvania Dutch. My mother was an Auslander. She was actually from New York State and St. Louis, so very far away. But I am from Robizonia. My immigrant ancestor settled in the Tulpehocken in 1738. So I attended Conrad Weiser and, of course, had the legendary Lester Breininger as a teacher, grew up with his children. My family's farm was on Penn Avenue, believe it or not, in Robizonia, next to where the post office is. It's that whole old house next to the post office. So I grew up with all of these things, and it became very, very important to me, the influence of my father's family, and of course, Mr. Breininger and many other things. One of my aunt's best friends was Marie Grafe, who was Arthur Grafe's widow. And they lived next door to the Gilbert Snyder family, and he was the Pennsylvania Dutch luminaries. Let's put
yes, this is the who's who of
yes,
people here you're going through.
Yeah. So it became very important to me. I embarked on a museum career after attending Penn State and Duquesne and Pittsburgh, and at first had to spend a lot of time in the South because there weren't many jobs in Pennsylvania, but was very fortunate to find this 25 years ago. I've been here for 25 years. They'll have to drag my carcass out of here, I always say. So I feel very fortunate because there's only a handful of true focused Pennsylvania Dutch cultural institution. There's really only a few of us, and we are one of them.
Well, that's a great segue. Boy, it's like you do this all the time, Candace. You segued right into what we want to do here. So I brought you on tonight because there's this group called the Schwenkfelders that I think a lot of people really, unless you're from the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, you probably have never even heard of these people, but yet they hold a place in our culture, in our history. And I know you're the expert, so I thought, Candace, I asked you and you agreed to come on. So the floor is yours. Let's talk about all things Schwenkfelder. And whenever you need me to advance the slide, just say, Doug, advance the slide.
Okay. Let's say that actually having Skippack as your town of the month, it was actually really good because that is a place where the Schwenkfelders lived. Maybe you discovered that.
That might have been planned.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the places. And of course, Mennonite heritage there too, very strongly. But the Schwenkfelder group is interesting because they're not really very well known. We're hoping to change that. It's been, like I said, 25 years since I've been here. I think we've made some inroads in the past 25 years with the larger facility we have here in Pennsburg in Montgomery County. And becoming more well known. But I know there are still a lot of people, even in the Pennsylvania Dutch communities, that don't know who the Schwenkfelders are. And this portrait is on the screen now because this man was the spiritual leader of the Schwenkfelders. His name was Caspar Schwenkfeld, and that's where that name comes from. This is an original oil painting on panel from 1556 that we own, believe it or not. It's very fortunate. I'll get more into our collection later, but this is an amazing acquisition that came here in the 1920s. So anyway, Caspar Schwenkfeld was nearly an exact contemporary of Martin Luther's. Their birth years were close to the same. Schwenkfeld's birth year is a little vague. We think it was either 1489 or 1490. I think Martin Luther's was 1489. If somebody else knows otherwise, please correct me. And then Martin Luther did not get to live as long as Schwenkfeld. I don't think Schwenkfeld lived till about 1560. And Schwenkfeld had a much different background, though, than Luther. He was from an aristocratic family in a place called Ossig in Lower Silesia, which at that time was ethnically German and German-speaking. Lower Silesia is now part of Poland, and it was ceded to Poland during the reconstruction of Europe in 1946, and all the ethnic Germans were forced out and forced into what would become East and West Germany. So it's now Polish. And I'll get into that a little bit later when I talk about the Schwenkfelders per se. So Schwenkfeld grew up in going to be the heir to his family's estates in Ossig, and that took a major turn in the early 16th century as he discovered the reformers and had himself what he called a spiritual awakening or a visitation from God, which was in fact a mystical experience where he felt Christ in his inner self. And please, if there are any deep theological questions, I warned Doug about this earlier. Please, you may forward them to me, but I should probably forward them to someone else. I'm pretty much Schwenkfeld 101. He was very complex, extremely complex, and it makes it even more difficult in the times that he was living in during the Reformation, and in the fact that he wrote in 16th century German or Latin, and the understanding of these things just piles the complexities one on top of the other. But his this mysticism remained a very important part of some Schwenkfelders' lives, coming into Pennsylvania in the 18th century. This kind of mysticism, Schwenkfeld and Schwenkfeldianism was always more of a spiritual faith, devoid of sort of earthly trappings. For instance, this is what Schwenkfeld is most known for, was his objection to the celebration of communion. He believed that it should be like-minded Christians coming together and not just this representation of the body and blood of Christ. It should indeed be, Christ should be present during communion without those physical manifestations of the body and blood of Christ. And this became what he was quite well known for. He and his colleagues and like-minded friends declared what they called a Stillstand in 1526, I believe. And at that time, he was ostracized by Luther. Luther felt that his views were heretical, and he was so in fear of his life, at least from time to time, and he went into a voluntary exile, meaning Schwenkfeld went into a voluntary exile, and continued, though, to write and publish, sometimes under pseudonyms, but to get these ideas out there, often starting arguments with the other reformers. He was famous for that. And so all this structure, the structure of the church, he found problematic. He found ritual problematic. He didn't think baptism was necessary. And especially I wrote myself a couple of notes. He believed that anywhere where true Christians gathered could be a church rather than a structure of a church led by a pastor or a priest. Um, and so he did not found a church. There was no church of Schwenkfeld in the 16th century. He sort of was a man who stood alone. He attracted interesting followers, which mostly were aristocratic people and intellectuals like himself. And interestingly, educated women. Now, you can imagine in the 16th century, educated women were a small group of people. Literate women, women who could read and write, were a very small group of people, and that was a really striking sort of aspect of his work, I think. So, we'll leave Schwenkfeld behind, but let's keep the portrait up because the next slide is probably not necessary yet. But so for 200 years, then these followers of Schwenkfeld would change. They'd become really regular people, farmers, craftsmen, tradesmen, and this sort of intellectualism, that the footing that Schwenkfeld probably started out on, started to fade away. But he still maintained this following of people, never a big following, and these people became known as Schwenkfelders. But they, of course, were persecuted for their beliefs, not on the level of Mennonites or other people like the Mennonites, but still they were forced at times into slavery. They would have their lands confiscated, just miscellaneous um, annoyances and difficulties were thrust upon them, usually not resulting in any kind of catastrophic situations, but still just a very unpleasant way of life. And it would vary. And for any of you who know German history, believe me, it's not my greatest forte, but the German states at the time would have different princes, and some princes might be more tolerant of the Schwenkfelders, and then some, that one would die and the new prince would say, you know, start going after them. So they had many problems for 200 years. But by the 18th century, most of these Schwenkfelders were centered in Lower Silesia, near Schwenkfeld's ancestral home, in a place called Harpersdorf, which is now known. And if you have any listeners from Poland or who speak Polish, please forgive me. This town that the most Schwenkfelders were centered around was called Harpersdorf, and is now called Twarda Chicha. And it's a place where you can visit today. There is still a Schwenkfelder monument there, and remains of Schwenkfelder farms. So still today in Poland, you can find the remnants of Schwenkfelder life. So these people were living there, and a Jesuit mission was sent in by the Holy Roman Emperor to see if they could convert these Schwenkfelders and bring them around. So they wanted them either to be Roman Catholic or Lutheran, but they could not be Schwenkfelder. And when just their mere presence, I suppose, of the Jesuits wasn't doing any good, they imposed sanctions on them, which included not being permitted to bury on sacred ground. Instead, they had to bury on the Viehweg or the cow path, where today there is still a monument to those Schwenkfelders who are buried on that cow path in Harpersdorf. Their children would be illegitimate if they were not baptized in the church, and if the marriages were not in the church, they would be illegitimate. They would confiscate the lands of the Schwenkfelders, and in one case built a Roman Catholic chapel on the lands. So there was all kinds of nastiness going on. And finally, by 1726, this went on for, I guess, about 8 years. By 1726, they had enough. And the most devoted among them, the most devoted families, which was still even smaller group, decided they would leave. And the only way, they were not permitted to leave, but the only way they could leave was by dark of night, where they crept away with what they could carry and wagons, I suppose. It was just whatever they had, you know, leaving their property and their livelihoods behind, creeping away across the border into Saxony, and finally ending, at least for most of them, on at Count Zinzendorf's lands in Bertelsdorf in Saxony, at the Moravian center of Herrnhut in Saxony. So Count Zinzendorf was going to provide them with asylum, and they did end up staying for about 7 years. When the ruling prince died, here is one of those instances, and then the new prince coming in was not as tolerant, and the Holy Roman Emperor wanted them out and back in Silesia for whatever reason. These things have never been quite clear to me why this small group of people were so important. And it could have been, some people say they were great linen weavers, some people say, you know, they were highly industrious people. I don't really understand. And maybe it was just that guy wanted his way no matter what. I don't know. That's pretty silly, but who knows. So they had to find a way out, and Zinzendorf would have preferred they go to Georgia. I can't even imagine had that happened, but oh my goodness, Georgia in the 1730s. I can't even begin to fathom what that would have been like. But they found an opportunity to come to Pennsylvania, of course, like the other Germans who had been invited to come to Pennsylvania and settle here. And with the promise for these Germans, and of course the Mennonites and others, of the promise of religious freedom and tolerance. And now you can change the slide there. Okay, so we'll talk about this painting in a minute. So they were funded by Mennonite brothers from Rotterdam, who gave them charity so they could come here without having to be indentured servants or redemptioners. So they had an opportunity to start fresh with a clean slate, and in return, all they had to do was create a charity fund here in Pennsylvania to help the impoverished while here, which they did do. We have wonderful records of the charity fund that they established. They were people of their word. But here we have a very interesting painting, and I would love to do, what is it, like highlights, that children's magazine?
Yeah.
What is wrong with this picture? As there are many things, particularly the boat that is backed up to the dock. I don't know how they accomplish that. Maybe somebody knows, some maritime folk know how they would get the boat out there. But anyway, it wouldn't even have been in the river at a dock. It was actually out anchored in the middle of the river, and they were brought in on rowboats, I suppose. But so this shows the Schwenkfelders, and actually this is the main immigration from 1734. There were about 4 or 5 immigrations, but this is the largest one. And there were also Palatines on this voyage that and I hate to say it because I am a Palatine descendant, but they said they fought too much. We have wonderful records from the Schwenkfelder, some of the Schwenkfelders who were on these voyages, and they recorded their impressions of what was going on during the voyage. It's an incredible record. The young man in the corner who's sitting on a chest by the barrel, he's actually depicting Christopher Schultz, who was 16 when he arrived here, and he created, probably, people call it a journal, but it was probably actually a reminiscence about the journey that remains such an important document here for the Schwenkfelder group. But we see the leader here, a gentleman known as George Weiss, in the black suit, greeting the Quaker Oats man and his fellow Quaker Oats man. I always think that's such a funny picture. And of course, many of these people in the first row that are very obvious they have identities. We don't know what they look like, but they do have identities. And these chests you see are immigrant chests that we actually have here in the collection. We have these old chests here in the collection of the Heritage Center. So that is an amazing thing. We actually have 4 immigrant chests from the voyages. Okay, I will stop now for a second. Doug, do you have any questions about anything thus far?
No, I don't, but I do have 2 comments from viewers. One from Andrew saying they may not be well known, but interesting. President Reagan appointed 2 Schwenkfelders to his cabinet. I
We are
wasn't
very
aware of that.
proud of that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing it up. They were Richard Schweiker, whose mother was a Schultz, a Schwenkfelder Schultz, and his father, Malcolm Schweiker, owned Olean Tile in Lansdale, and I think that was the name of it, but also owned the land that Central Schwenkfelder Church is on, and very important family. And then Drew Lewis, who I do not think had Schwenkfelder roots, but belonged to Central Schwenkfelder Church. And just to tie up our important Schwenkfelders, we also had General and / Governor John F. Hartranft, who the only Hartranft to immigrate to America was a Schwenkfelder, Tobias Hartranft, and Martin Brumbaugh, who was governor in the early 20th century. And who else? Oh, the Supreme Court Justice Owen J. Roberts. And I know that I can come up with more given a chance, but those are my 4 big boys.
Those are some important names. My good friend Scott, who's joining us tonight. This is interesting. My 8th great grandparents, Melchior Kraus and Anna Hedrich Kraus, were Schwenkfelders from Harpersdorf, what we were just talking about. Anna settled in Pennsylvania with her children, including his 7th great grandfather, Balthasar Kraus, in 1733. And here their descendant is sitting watching this with us. Isn't that a wonderful time?
Yeah.
No.
Well, and today that brings to mind a comment. There are a few different kinds of Schwenkfelders. There are Schwenkfelders by blood, which I think, Scott, it would be considered a Schwenkfelder by blood, of course. There are Schwenkfelders by blood who are still practicing Schwenkfelders, meaning they attend the Schwenkfelder Church, which I should add is very different. True Schwenkfeldianism doesn't exist anymore. It was probably mostly absorbed into mainstream Protestantism, and this was long ago. They often say that Schwenkfeld was the first pietist, if you're familiar with the pietist movement in the Lutheran Church in the 17th century, Schwenkfeld very much had those kinds of characteristics. And so much of that personal relationship with God and Christ is so much a part of Schwenkfeldianism, and of course the pietistic movement. And they say that Schwenkfeld may have influenced Quakerism. So maybe if you attend a Quaker service, you might see the remnants of Schwenkfeldianism as they really were, instead of what we are today, which is a mainstream church very rooted in the community. 2 of the Schwenkfelder churches are even affiliated with the United Church of Christ, which is my church heritage. Now, I don't know where I was, but that's okay. So,
well, I'll flick the image and maybe you'll know. Yeah.
Okay. I included this wonderful map that was drawn by the Schwenkfelder immigrant David Schultz, that shows where early Schwenkfelders, the Schwenkfelder immigrants, families settled. Maybe some of you, hopefully, can read this. We have the Milfords represented here in Lehigh and Bucks County. We have Franconia Hatfield in Montgomery County, North Wales. That's very prominent. Can you find the Perkiomen Creek? Can you find the Schuylkill River? And up here in the further reaches, this is Hereford Township. Right here, there's a county line there, that line off to the left-hand side of the map. And and then Hereford, where many Schwenkfelders settled. There's a funny word right below the Perkiomen Creek to the right of that county line, which is I think here it says Kashahup. You probably know what that means. That was a spelling of an 18th century spelling of Goshenhoppen, and they're representing the Goshenhoppen area right there. So this is a wonderful survivor. David Schultz was a surveyor, very prominent surveyor here in this part of Montgomery County and in Berks County and Lehigh. And he made this map specifically to send home to Silesia for the people, or to actually probably Saxony, where people were still living, to show them where their families may have ended up in Pennsylvania. Not that they had any real understanding, but this also had a key that went with it and told the whole story of the settlement of the Schwenkfelders in Pennsylvania. So they settled essentially from Chestnut Hill, which you don't see, and Germantown here, because that's further down the river there, and all the way up into Macungie, which you don't see also. But that was pretty much the swath, then through Montgomery County and up into Lehigh and Berks County. That was where the most of the settlement was. And the people in Chestnut Hill vicinity were very interesting because they were much different. They ended up being much different from their country cousins. They were a little more sophisticated and had a different lifestyle than their friends up the river. So any other questions right now before I go any further? Okay,
no,
let's see what time it is. I better keep moving. Okay, well, this book is, I wanted to show the title page. If you're a Schwenkfelder descendant, you may be familiar with this book. I hope you are. If not, and you think you may have Schwenkfelders in your background, this is how you find out about them. This book was published in 1923. So any of your ancestors who were born before 1920, or hopefully 1923, but there may be a cutoff that's more around 1920, you should be able to find them in this book. We are also currently have an ongoing update of it through our Society of the Schwenkfeldian Exiles, which is sort of akin to the Mayflower Society. And if you do feel you have Schwenkfelder heritage, you can certainly contact us. Contact me. My email is Candace@schwenkfelder.org, CANDACE. I should have included that so you would see it. But contact me and I can point you in the right direction to find out if you have Schwenkfelder heritage. How we determine that is if you are descended from one of those immigrants that came in those immigrations. And it's a finite number of people. We know all of them, and they all show up in this book. So, okay. So let me talk a little bit about the Heritage Center.
Oh,
and
okay.
Okay.
You want me
No,
pictures of the Heritage Center? Okay, all right, yeah.
You can go on. Many of you out there, I hope, or maybe some of you might be familiar with us through our Frock Tour collection. In 1998, our former executive director, late former executive director, Dennis Moyer, wrote a book that was published by the Pennsylvania German Society on our Proctor collection. It was by no means exhaustive. We have a huge collection of at least 1,000 pieces, some of which are merely drawings, like the one you see on the right. That was a drawing by Susanna Hebner from 1818. And I should say Susanna Hebner was probably the most skilled female Proctor artist. Maybe somebody will want to fight me on that, but I would say there are precious few, I mean, a handful of known female Proctor artists who were working on the same level as men. Because if you aren't really familiar with Proctor, or as we should call them if you aren't familiar, Pennsylvania German decorated manuscripts, that's a phrase we often use. They are they were the sphere of men who were school teachers, men who were pastors. They had a purpose. Today we look at them and we see folk art. Some people look at them and see dollar signs. I am not one of those. I see them and see something that was a tool for schoolmasters, especially in the Schwenkfelder and Mennonite faith, because they did not practice infant baptism, so they did not have those Geburts- und Taufscheine, which are the birth and baptismal certificates, which probably any of you who are Pennsylvania German have in your family, the printed versions. So in our collection, we have mostly schoolmaster work, like the piece on your left that was made by the Reverend David Kriebel, who was of Gwynedd and Worcester Township near Skipack in Montgomery County. Susanna Hebner was from Worcester Township, and these are two of our great masterpieces here in the collection. So if you're interested in frock tour, we are having an exhibit later this year called Frock Tour in Miniature. I don't have frock tour on exhibit all the time. It's hard to exhibit for me, but I try, and if it's not on exhibit, I will also take appointments and do show and tells if you're interested in looking at frock tour. But I should send you to our wonderful colleagues at the Mennonite Heritage Center in Harleysville, which does have a long-term frock tour exhibit. Please visit them if you are craving frock tour. So let's move on to the next slide. And this is a piece from another collection I am extremely proud of here at the Heritage Center, our needlework collection. This is a sampler from 1807 by a young Schwenkfelder woman, Katrina Anders. She was from the central Montgomery County. This is a wonderful motif sampler that was made by her to learn stitching as a young girl or young woman. I don't know how old she was at this time, but it was not to learn alphabets. It was not anything like that. Young women needed to learn to stitch and sew to fulfill their roles as wives and mothers. And they would pass these skills on to their daughters, granddaughters, what have you. This is something that surely Katerina would have learned from one of her elder family members or perhaps friends. And they are just wonderful treasures that we have here at the Heritage Center. And next one. And here is, in fact, a quilt from our collection. When I came here, we started out with probably about 40 quilts. We now have over 200. I'm a little obsessed. This quilt is also from, everything I'm showing you is, I think, is from Worcester Township. This is also from Worcester Township, made by a lady named Clarella Anders. And she was a wonderful quilter. This is called a Rising Sun pattern quilt. It's a star with satellites, and our local ladies called it Rising Sun. So we often have quilt programs all through the year. If you come to our website at www.schwenkfelder.org and find out what exhibits are on, or if you're a quilt fanatic, once more, reach out to me. I can't do show and tell with quilts very easily, but I'll be glad to point you into the direction of our database. Okay, what's next? And here is another wonderful, everything's wonderful in my world. All my superlatives. This is a very special needlework. It's called a Schwenkfelder Townscape. These were only made by Schwenkfelder girls, and they seem to be made, oh my goodness, in Worcester Township. A lot of great things came out of Worcester Township in the proximity of the Peter Wentz farmstead. If you've ever visited Peter Wentz, it is one of our jewels of Pennsylvania German architecture, preserved architecture. And all the girls who made these very unusual wool embroideries were sort of living around there, or actually were from the Schultz family that owned Peter Wentz in the 19th century. This is one in particular. These are unique to the Schwenkfelder group. No one else made them. This was made by Sarah Kriebel in 1849, I believe. And her father made that wonderful frock tour, Reverend David Kriebel, that you saw before. Okay. What do I have anything? Oh, and here's another sampler from our collection. This one, late 18th century, 1796. This was made by Lydia Yakel, who was from the Chestnut Hill area. Her father was a wealthy landowner in Chestnut Hill. Unfortunately, they no longer own the land in Chestnut Hill, which is a shame because I think like the Philadelphia railroad station was there and on property they owned. But this is a charming little sampler by Lydia. We actually have two that she made. Okay. And here is, I wanted to show you a few views of the Heritage Center. This is our Schwenkfelder Gallery, and this is showing you our incredible collection of painted chests. I don't know if there's any other Pennsylvania German cultural institution where you will see such an array of painted chests. Now, granted, they are not the fabulous unicorn pieces from Berks County or the floral designs. They tend to be rather simple, modest, but they do have some sort of color blocking. You'll see the one with the circles in the back, and this wonderful piece for Christina Schultz from 1835, where he had a bit of trouble fitting her name in there. But this one is it's also so big. That's why it sits there. It can't be with the others. But we have actually 16 Schwenkfelder painted chests and try to show all our domestic life material in this gallery. Okay, next, Doug. Oh, here is our Rural Life Gallery, which is a visual storage concept where we tried to get all of our tools and equipment that contributed to their rural activities out in one gallery, and along with the Conestoga wagon, which we're very excited to have, even though we're sort of latecomers to the Conestoga wagon game. We got ours from Valley Forge a few years ago. They wanted to find a home for it, and it had to be somewhere where it wasn't going to be used, and we very gladly gave it a home. It was redone probably a few decades ago, but it's still a good representation of a Conestoga wagon. And this gallery is part of our most recent edition in 2020, which it was a terrible year to do this, but that's when it happened. We opened this edition, the Rural Life Gallery, and then above this gallery is what we call the Rural Entrepreneurship Gallery, which is just that. It covers the topics of entrepreneurship in southeastern Pennsylvania from the 18th to the early mid 20th century. Okay, Doug. And here we have some members of the extended Hartranft families looking at an exhibit that's up currently through May 15th on General/Governor John F. Hartranft, who was a Civil War hero, a winner of the Medal of Honor, a great interesting man who has sort of drifted into a bit of obscurity, and we were hoping to change that. The portraits you see there are from a Hartranft family member, and we also have a wonderful collection of objects from Hartranft from his great-granddaughter Helen Shireman, which we are so pleased and proud she allowed us to exhibit. So that's through May 15th, if you can join us. And then next, what do I have? Oh, and that is our barn that when we added the additions in 2020, we also added the barn. It is mostly handicapped accessible through connectors that you can sort of see on the left-hand side of the photo. So you don't have to even leave our building. You go right into the barn. And it is a barn that comes from Talmenson Township in Montgomery County from the Sect family. They were farmers there for the last 100 years, and the barn itself is going to be 200 years old in 2026. And it's a nice small barn and really is a good example of how barns did at one time look for the Pennsylvania Germans. We are losing them very rapidly in central Montgomery County because of development. And the Seipt family really wanted to preserve this. So that's why we were fortunate to have it. And I think that is the front of our building. So So you'll know where you are if you come to Pennsburg. Hopefully you'll be able to find us. We're at 105 Seminary Street. We are next to the Perkiomen School. So if you need to ask directions and they don't know where we are, which it's hard to miss this very large building, people still don't always know. If you ask where the Perkiomen School is, which is a private school, they will know where you will find us also, because we're right next door.
Candace, you're a wealth of knowledge and
Ah,
such a wonderful person. Thank you so much for
you're
giving us this
welcome.
story tonight. You know, I really wanted to highlight the Schwenkfelders because, as you've alluded to, so many people know nothing about them. Even people that live in the region where they lived, there's this who are these people? And I grew up, you know, in Berks County, deep in Pennsylvania Dutch stuff, but I never heard anything about the
Yeah.
Schwenkfelders
Yeah,
growing
me
up
too.
in northern Berks. So it was great, you know, that when and I had the opportunity back during COVID, when our good friend Rachel was working there doing
Yes,
educational
yes,
programs, Chris and I came down and did a live stream Groundhog Day event for
yes,
you guys. And that
yes.
was my first time coming to the site.
Mhm.
And I was just blown away.
Oh, thank you, Doug.
I spent 15 minutes at least, if not 20 minutes, just looking at those chests because I'd never seen a collection like that.
I know,
I
I'm
mean,
so
you go,
proud of them.
you go to a museum, you know, you go to Reading Public Museum or you go to the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center and you'll see one, maybe two. But when I walked in there, and that's one of the first things when you first walk into at least from the entrance that we came in, it's like, that's what greeted us. And I
Yeah,
was just completely blown away. And then when you go into that back room where all of that, I mean, we saw the plows and the Conestoga wagon, but that picture doesn't do that room justice because it's a
no, it
massive
doesn't,
room.
it
And I
doesn't.
mean, any possible tool from 18th 19th century farm life you guys have on display.
Yeah,
It is unbelievable. You honestly have a lot to be proud of, and I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing, and you have the funding that you're able to maintain this collection.
that's
And yeah.
exactly, yeah, and I should add, when you say that, we are almost completely privately funded.
Oh my
We
goodness.
get a little public money now and then. We get, of course, there's money from the state through the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. We get a small annual grant, but it's, believe it or not, we have some very fine angels among us
Mm,
who have helped us build this incredible facility, both uh, as the structure itself, but what's inside of it, and keep us all going here.
right.
Yeah,
Well, it's easy to visit if you're in the greater Perkiomen area. Please check it out. I have the link in the show notes down below to their website. They're very active on Candace is very active on social media for the Schwenkfelders. I love if it's you running your Instagram feed, kudos, because I love it. You guys you post really great stuff. And same way with your Facebook. So you guys are really connected. You can connect with the Schwenkfelders through multiple means, but please, if you're in the area, do take the time to go visit and tour the site because it is worth the trip. 100%. 100%.
thank you, Doug. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Candace, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And if you have questions for Candace, again, you can find her email on their website and she'll give you private showings. My goodness, what more
I
could you ask
will.
for?
I
That's
will. I
awesome.
will. I am not an inaccessible curator. And you can tell by I'm in my natural habitat, which is sort of a mess. So, oh
Well,
well.
no, the main rooms where everybody goes, they're clean and all
Yes, yes,
very, very
yes.
well. No, I get you. I get you. Candace, thanks so much for
Thank
coming on
you,
the show
Doug.
this month. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. Hopefully
Yeah,
we'll run into each other at some point down the
yeah,
road, Candace.
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank
Candace.
you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
How's that, people? You got your history lesson and a little bit of art and a little bit of culture. Oh, we're trying to bring you everything we can, the full palette that runs the Pennsylvania Dutch world. Or I didn't like whoever came with that Dougland. I don't know. I like it, but I'm not that full of myself. We won't stick with that. But thank you, Candace, so much. And seriously, I mean it when I say go check out the Schwenkfelder collection. It is truly something to see. I was absolutely blown away by their collection. And we saw some pictures tonight, but we saw just a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of what they have. So definitely check them out, check their website out, and check out what they have on social media because they really do a good job. Well, people, let's move into the last couple parts here of the show. Every month, as you know, if you've been watching, I try to do something Pennsylvania Dutch related language wise. And this month, I wanted to bring you this poem. We have a poem called Der Piewie is Do by Arthur Wuchter, who lived from 1882 to 1956. Now, for those of you not of Pennsylvania Dutch origin, maybe you've never heard of the Piewie. The Piewie is a bird, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you people. I don't know what the actual bird is in English, like what the name of the bird is in English. I only ever heard it referred to as the Piewie. And there's been a lot of poetry in Pennsylvania Dutch written about Piewie because the Piewie was one of the first birds to come back when spring came. And when the Piewie came, that was a sign that spring was right around the corner. Much like most of us, we think of the robin who brings the spring as well. The Amschel, that's a different word in Pennsylvania Dutch for a robin. But we have this Piewie. And here's a poem, real short poem. The English is on the right-hand side. The German is, the Pennsylvania Dutch is on the left. I'll read the Pennsylvania Dutch so you can hear it. You can follow along on either side that you want to follow along. So, Da Piewie is Do by Arthur Wuchter. I gucke mal dade, der Piewie is do. Hock du vom Poste, was is so froh? I, Piewie, wo warst du, zit am Spootjahr gewest? Warst fat mit dem Sommer, warst sittlich verrest? Ach, gäb's mir doch Frühjahr, der Winter kann geh, mit Wascht und mit Panhorst, mit Eis und mit Schnee. Ich bin jo so frehlich, ich bin jo so froh. Was will ma dann meiner? Der Piewie is do. So there you go. Oh, Scott, you are the man. Scott says Pewit, Northern Lapwing, Green Plover. Scott, do you know how long I looked online to try and find that answer? And I couldn't find it. And all I should have done was just gave you a shout. Well, there we go, people. The Piewie. Now you know what it is in English. Thanks, Scott. You the man. You the man, Scott. That's great. All right. Every month also, I bring you some kind of music. And this week, I have to be honest, this month was Easter. For those of us that celebrate as Christians, we celebrated Easter a couple of weeks ago here in April. So I wanted to go with a religious themed song. I thought it was fitting since it is, the month of Easter. And this is a song that Chris and I do quite often when we do performances in Pennsylvania Dutch country. We took a pretty popular hymn, Jerusalem, My Happy Home, and I translated it into Pennsylvania Dutch because this was a hymn that I always loved singing in English in church. I just love the melody so much. And I thought, well, let's have a Pennsylvania Dutch version. So I translated into Pennsylvania Dutch, Yerusalem, My frehlich, heemet. And this is a video that Chris and I did, oh my goodness, a while ago. So we look a little younger. I think my hair's not as gray in this video. Give me 1 second to share this screen. Yeah, I didn't have gray hair my whole life. So here is Yerusalem, My frehlich, heemet. You're going to hear Chris LaRose, my partner in crime, play some awesome clawhammer banjo here on this piece. So without further ado, here we go.
Jerusalem, my frehlich, heemet, soll ich zu dir kommen, und soll mein Sarien habe dein Fried, und soll ich sehen, o frehlich, aber von der Heilige du siehst, lieblich Grund, in dir kein Saria, kann ich wieder kein Braun, kein Haar, kein Blau, ihr Gott und ihr Mut, ich darf den Hand so bringen, dann mag sie so lieblich Blumen, dann jetzt singen sie. Tag die Pflegen gebe, Frucht und ewig Ruhe, dort mag Jerusalem, my frehlich heemet dorthin. Ich will Gott sein, den mein brauner Weg, aber ein Fried, ich will sehen.
I forgot to unmute my microphone. Thanks, Scott, for letting me know. I was saying every month, you know that you can get these shirts and stuff. It's not just shirts. You can get magnets and stickers. The Mock Scoot one up there in the upper right-hand corner, I got that printed as a magnet on my refrigerator door. You can get that too if you visit our website, zazzle.com/PA Dutch stuff. Check out that link. It'll be in the show notes down below for those of you watching after this has gone live. But we thank you for any support you want. We're not in it for the money, of course. We're in it because we want to get our stuff out there and have people be able to show off their Pennsylvania Dutch pride. If you like what we're doing here, also, you can feel free to support us financially at the buymeacoffee.com/Doug Maidenford. For as little as $5, you can buy me a coffee. And what that will allow to do, all money raised through the Buy Me a Coffee campaign goes into the upkeep of the channel. And I'd like to give a quick shout out to some people that have recently donated money. So a gross Dank für die Unterstützung, great thanks for your support to Torben Schreiner, Shep Glennon, Stacy Stewart, Wendy Baker, Alan Moyer, Michael Lamara, Gail Motter, Seth Moog. He's joining us tonight. Nancy Elazer. And I have to give these two guys are bolded because just yesterday I created a wish list item on my Buy Me a Coffee. And it was one of those things like, I'll throw it out there to see what happens. I would like to get some wireless microphones for doing some videos out in the field, like at the Kutztown Folk Festival, for example, things like that. And I put this wish list thing out there and I said, hey, I'm trying to raise money to buy these microphones. Norman Young, who's joining us tonight, and whoever Big GZ2 is, they funded this overnight. I woke up this morning to an email saying, your wish has been granted from the Buy Me a Coffee people. And I was blown away. My coffee tasted so great this morning. So huge shout out and thank you to Norman and whoever Big GZ2 is. I don't know who you are, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And all of those people listed here, thank you for your support. And if you've supported me in the past, thank you as well. And even if you don't give any money, you don't have to. Just joining and joining the live stream every month, watching the channel, that's support enough. And I thank you all for doing that month after month after month. I really, really appreciate it. Well, people, mark your calendars because our next episode of PA Dutch Live will be on Wednesday, May 17th at 2023 at 6 p.m. And next month, I'll be welcoming our good friend who joins us every month, Carol Diefenbach-Kantner from beautiful Burnville, Pennsylvania. She will be joining us to talk about this really big event that's taking place all year long, the Tulpehocken Settlement's 300th anniversary. There are multiple events planned throughout the year in the region of what is known as the Tulpehocken Settlement. She's going to be joining us next month to talk about what is the Tulpehocken Settlement, who were these people, how does it fit into the Pennsylvania Dutch story, and what are the people that live in this area today doing to celebrate this important anniversary. So I can't wait for Carol to be with us next month. It's going to be a really great show. So please join on May 17th. Put that on your calendar. It has been an absolute pleasure. I ran a little long tonight. Sorry, guys, but I think it was a great show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Again, if you like what you do, what we're doing here, let us know. Follow along on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on all three. Just look for @PADutch101 and you can follow along. Like every Monday, you'll get Meme Monday, Meme Moondog. We're just a lot of fun stuff, all things related to Pennsylvania Dutch, of course. I love you all for your continued support. I look forward to being with you on the 17th of May because it's going to be a great episode with Carol and all about the Tulpehocken settlement. But until then, dear friends, please take care. Have a great rest of April and a great start to the month of May. And I can't wait to be with you all on the 17th. But till then, dear friends, please take care. And as we say in Pennsylvania Dutch, Mach's gut. Mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir für now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so es ist, mach's gut für now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir, mach's gut zu dir für now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so es ist, mach's gut für now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Und so mach's gut, lieber Freund, mach's gut.